Good day, Professor. Good day, classmates. You are welcome to our exploration on the evolution, on the factors that affect the educational system in the unitary state of Cameroon, from the colonial legacy to modern reforms. Cameroon's unitary system has navigated complex challenges in restructuring and continuous attempts at national integration. Although the country often speaks of building a unitary or integrated education system, Cameroon does not operate a completely unified system. Instead, it maintains two distinct subsystems: the Anglophone subsystem, which is British influenced, and the Francophone subsystem, which is French influenced, functioning simultaneously within one nation. We are going to look at how the unitary system of education began. The push towards unitary education system began after the reunification of the former British Southern Cameroon and French Cameroon in 1961, during the period known as the United Republic of Cameroon. That was between 1961 to 1972. Efforts made during this period was aimed to harmonize the two inherited systems and provide national cohesion. But despite all efforts to unify the two systems, they remain structurally different, contributing to the ongoing sociopolitical tension, especially in the Anglophone regions. In this study, we shall be focusing on the factors affecting the various stages of change, which are the historical, sociological, political, economic, cultural, and physiological factors that has influenced the educational system over time in the United Republic of Cameroon. This is between 1961 to 1972. But before we continue, let us look at some key words and their definitions. What is education? It is a process of learning and gaining skills, knowledge, and values that help one to grow as a person and become a functional member in the society. The unitary system of education. This is a system of education whereby power is concentrated in a central authority, and the regional or local government derive their powers from the central government. The central government can override decisions by the local government. We will now look at the historical factors and how they have influenced education over time. Historically, the educational system in Cameroon is deeply rooted in the country's colonial legacy of German, British, and French rule, as well as the challenges post-independent national integration. This historic context has led to the development of the unitary system with both strengths and challenges. The French and British colonial periods, 1916. After World War I, Cameroon was divided between British and French rule, and this division had a lasting impact on the country's educational system. The educational system introduced by the French and British were quite distinct, creating a dual educational structure in Cameroon that continues to affect the system today. Let us look at the French Cameroon, 1916 to 1960. Under French colonial rule, Cameroon adopted a centralized system of education based on the French model. Education was highly hierarchical, elitist, and focused on creating a small group of intellectuals and administrators to serve the colonial administration. The French language and heritage dominated the curriculum, and schools were mainly confined in urban areas. At that time, the rural majority had limited access to formal education, and the system was designed to limit the development of the masses. ACAM 2003. The centralization of power in educational policy underlines the gap between the educated elite and the larger population. Let us look at the British Cameroon, 1916 to 1961. The British, by contrast, introduced a more decentralized system. The British education model was based on the dual school system, which separated academic education from vocational training. Buea, 2011. English was the primary language of instruction, and the British administration allowed for more direct involvement of local community in educational decisions. The system still exclusionary offered a slightly more inclusive structure than the French. This divergence between French and British education approach would later complicate post-independence attempts to unify the educational system during the linguistic and curricular divide that still persists in the country today. Looking at post-independence and unification process, when Cameroon gained independence in 1960, French-speaking Cameroon, and in 1961 the English-speaking Cameroon, the challenge of unifying the two regions with their distinct colonial legacy became paramount. This period marked the beginning of the effort to establish a unitary education system. The unification of education system in 1961, following the unification of French and British Cameroon, the government sought to integrate the two distinct educational systems into a national cohesion structure. The unitary state of Cameroon was established, and this entailed harmonizing educational standards, the curricula and policies to reflect both the French-speaking and the English-speaking population. Quadio, 2000. The unification process faced many challenges, especially in reconciling the educational differences between the two regions. One of the central policies adopted was the introduction of bilingual education, with both French and English as the languages of instruction, as official languages of instruction in schools. Beaufort, 1991. This bilingual system sought to promote unity, but also created complication as the country continued to juggle educational system within one national territory. Challenges of integration. The French and English system are fundamentally in their approach to centralize the British system, which was decentralized and allowed for more local participants. Reconciling this difference led to tension, local participation between Anglophones and Francophone population, which still shapes the educational landscape in Cameroon today. Nkwele, 2012. Additionally, educational access to rural areas was often excluded from formal school opportunities. We are going to look at the impact of language and cultural diversity. Cameroon's linguistic diversity, with more than 200 ethnic groups and over 270 languages, continues to be a major factor in shaping the educational system. The introduction of both French and English as official language for instruction, alongside the need to respect local languages, has created a complex educational system that strives to balance multilingualism with national unity. However, bilingualism has always been at odds with the country's educational realities. Many students in rural areas do not speak French nor English fluently, and this has posed significant barriers to accessing education. Ambe, 2011. Also, the lack of teachers training colleges in local languages has contributed to poor educational outcome for students from non-francophone or non-anglophone regions. We are going to look at the educational reforms and the way forward. In recent years, the government of Cameroon has made efforts to improve the quality of education through various reforms, including decentralization of education, of educational administration, to give local regions more control over their schools. The government has also improved teacher training and also passed towards and also improve technical and vocational education. The government has invested in infrastructure to reduce regional discrepancy in education, especially in rural areas. However, the central challenge remains how to balance the demands of a unitary education system with the cultural and linguistic needs of Cameroonians' population. This challenge is further complicated by the political and social dynamics that continue to shape the educational policy in the country, dated 2016. At this point, I'm going to hand over the floor to my colleague who will continue with the sociological and political effects of education in Cameroon. Thank you very much.
Good day, Professor. Good day, classmates. I'm called Ebot, and I'll be talking on the economic and cultural factors influencing education in the unitary system of Cameroon. Both economic efficiency and pursuit of united national identity out of diverse colonial legacies were key factors influencing Cameroon's transition to and maintenance of a unitary system of government. The unitary system was seen as a solution to the complex and expensive federal structure that existed from 1961 to 1972. I'll begin with economic factors. High cost of federation. The primary economic argument for a unitary state was the prohibitive cost of the federal system, which involved maintaining three governments, which are Federal, East Cameroon, and West Cameroon, three parliaments, separate public services, different police forces, and separate judicial and customs systems. The resulting administrative duplications and conflicts were deemed inefficient. I have another point which is economic disparities. West Cameroon was economically less developed and became financially dependent on the federal subsidies, leading to an unequal development that the federal system failed to resolve. In some areas worsened. We have another point which is harmonization of economic policies. The central government sought to harmonize economic policies, including replacing the West Cameroon pound sterling into the CFA franc and adopting the metric system, which was more effectively achieved under a centralized system. We have a centralized economic planning. A unitary system allowed for a more coordinated and centralized approach to a national economic planning and resource management, which was aligned with the government's economic policy of planned liberalism, in bracket, focused on cash crops and petroleum development. Moving over, we'll go to the cultural factors. Some cultural factors include national integration and unity. The desire to build a strong and unified nation from the diverse British and French colonial legacies was a major driving force. The unitary system was promoted as a means to foster a common national identity, transcending linguistic, historical, tribal, and religious particularities. We move forward to another point, which is managing diversity. Cameroon is a multi-ethnic and multicultural nation, that is, Africa in miniature. The unitary system was intended to manage the complex diversity by creating uniforms, laws, and administration across the country, reducing regional disparities and potential conflicts arising from the separate colonial heritages. For example, British common law versus French civil laws. We also have political centralization. The ruling political party, the Cameroon National Union, that is CNU, became the sole legal party in 1966, paving the way for the political climate that made the transition to a unitary state particularly feasible. This top-down political consolidation reinforced to move to a single powerful central government. We have another point, which is the fear of succession or instability. In the broader African context of the 1960s and 70s, many newly independent nations faced political instability and military coups. A strong, centralized unitary state was perceived by the president, Amadou Ahidjo, and his supporters as a more stable form of government that could aim to achieve national integration and economic efficiency. Its implementation led to tensions, particularly among Anglophone Cameroonians, who felt their unique cultural and legal heritage was being eroded. That was an issue that persisted over time. Thank you, and I'll give the floor to my colleague.
Good afternoon, Prof. Good afternoon, dear classmates. I'm Daniel Laura, and I'll be presenting the political reforms that influence the educational system under the unitary system of government. And we'll start with the fact that education became centralized. With the centralization of the state authority, educational policies, governance, and regularization became more centralized. The government had total control of the educational system, and that's from the basic through the secondary through higher education. Government was able to control it under the unitary system of government. Another political reform was the harmonization and standardization of policies. Under the unitary system, policies were able to be harmonized and standardized because the government had total control, and they were able to agree on policies such as the duration of courses, when schools were going to begin. They were able to agree on the school's curriculum and the duration of the academic year, or how the academic year calendar was going to look like under the unitary system of government. Another aspect is the adoption of the 1998 law on education. This law was a very important law because it created a legal framework on how the educational system was going to look like in Cameroon. And this law, the major highlight was that it prioritized education in the country. Education was given a top priority with the 1998 law. And also it helped to inculcate creativity, entrepreneurship, and to adapt education to economic and social development demands. Another political reform was the free universal primary education. The government has already, from the previous point, the government has already made education a top priority. To reduce the rural-urban divide, government decided to make education at the universal, at the basic level free, meaning primary education became free for Cameroonians. This enabled Cameroonians to ensure that at least Cameroonians were educated at the foundational level. Another political reform was the expansion, diversification, and modernization of secondary and technical education. Under the Buea regime, that's the unitary system of government, the government expanded the creation of schools as nursery, primary, secondary, and even higher institutions, and even training institutions for teachers. We had the creation of more technical schools, and we had the creation of more higher institutes. We see that in all 10 regions of the country, we have higher institutes present. All these are reforms, political reforms under the unitary system of government. Another political reform was governance, decentralization, and local involvement. Though the 1972 unitary system centralized power, at some point, subsequent reforms recognized the need for involving local communities and authorities. As the popular African adage says, it takes a village to raise a child. Hence, education has been made more responsive to local realities and has reduced central administrative bottlenecks and encouraged community participation in the educational process. For example, we have some schools where the board members are members of the local community, or you see a case where they want to organize a disciplinary committee council, and members of the community, like the chief, are invited to participate in this council. So we see that in as much as we have a centralized system of government, power has been relegated. Some power has been relegated to the local levels to implicate them in the educational process. So look at the sociological reforms of the educational system in Cameroon under the unitary system of government, and we look at the promotion of national unity and social integration. Education has been used as a tool to promote national unity and social integration, cohesion under the unitary system of government. National integration, civic education, and national consciousness have been inculcated in our school curricula through subjects such as citizenship and national culture. As we have teachers, we also have teachers being posted in other parts of the region to foster cross-cultural interactions, parents sending their children to boarding schools to meet and interact with children from other cultures and social stratas. For example, you have a teacher who hails from the Southwest, born and bred in the Southwest, being sent to the far north to teach. That is exposing you to another culture, another lifestyle through education. We have parents who are based in Yaoundé, French-speaking parents who send their children to boarding schools, be it in the Northwest or Southwest, for them to experience another part of life, another culture in the country. All this is thanks to education. We also have bilingualization and harmonization of the two cultural systems. The system has strengthened the French and the English system as a symbol of national cohesion. We have the creation of bilingual education system where children are taught both in English and in French. We have a system where what they call the section bilingue, where you have students being taught, let's say, geography in French, and then the same students are being taught geography in English. That's the bilingual section, the bilingual system of education, sorry. And all this is thanks to the unitary system of government. They are trying to merge the two and create better bilingual citizens. We also have the expansion of education for social equality. There has been the expansion of education for social equality in the unitary system of government. For example, the reforms towards universal primary education, as we earlier saw, reduces class-based inequalities. We also have the construction of schools in rural areas to reduce the urban-rural divide, meaning that people who are in the village can access education, the people in town can access education. And we spoke about the free education at the basic level, meaning that even at the village level or at the rural areas, people can have at least the foundation in education. That's the primary level. We also have scholarships being awarded and fee subsidy programs targeting minority and vulnerable groups such as the Ngororos, the Pygmies, or those with special needs. Another sociological reform is gender equality and inclusion of girls. In the educational system under the unitary system of government, gender equality and the inclusion of girls is being promoted. There has been nationwide campaign promoting girls' education and combating gender bias. There have also been policies to address sociocultural norms, discouraging girls from schooling, especially in northern regions. We see cases where a young girl will be pledged for marriage and will not be able to go to school. But with this, the government is trying to reduce gender inequality and encourage young girls going to school, creating girl clubs in schools such as Girl Shine to empower these girls and to encourage them to go to school. We also have the inclusion of vulnerable and marginalized population. Also, the unitary system of government has promoted the inclusion of vulnerable and marginalized groups. For example, promoting inclusive education to integrate learners with special needs into mainstream schools. Before now, we had schools, let's say for example, for the blind, for those who are physically disabled. But in recent times, or under the unitary system of government, the government is trying to integrate these people with special needs into mainstream schools. You go to a class and you see children who are learning and others are using braille in the same class. This is a sociological reform under the unitary system of government to integrate even people with special needs for them not to feel left out. And then we have the increase in technical and vocational training schools. In the unitary system of government, there has been an upsurge in technical and vocational training schools within the country for social mobility. This expansion helps to integrate youths into society more effectively. This gives youths hands-on training and provides practical skills, and this has greatly curbed unemployment in the country. We also have the introduction of peace education and conflict prevention. There has been the introduction of peace education and conflict prevention in the educational system under the unitary system of government. We now have modules that address social tension and promote dialogue, school multicultural coexistence, what we now call the view and sound. And then lastly, we have digitalization as a sociological reform under the unitary system of government. Lastly, there has been digital social interaction in the educational system. There is a use of ICT to bridge the social gap between rural and urban learners. Online blended learner platforms have been created to ensure educational continuity during conflicts such as pandemics or crisis. For example, when there was the COVID-19 outbreak, we saw that classes were being aired on national TV to implicate even people who were in the rural areas who were not able to go to school. Even during the crisis, children who probably their schools were shut down were able to access education, to access classes online or via TV thanks to digitalization. Thank you very much. We will also be looking at the philosophical reforms of the educational system under the unitary system of child. We will also be looking at the philosophical reforms of the educational system under the unitary system of government in Cameroon. The transition from the Federal Republic to the unitary state in 1972 marked a fundamental pivot in Cameroonian educational philosophy. The philosophical views of every educational system are based on the goals it seeks to achieve. This swift transition of government changed Cameroon's educational philosophies from being colonially oriented to the promotion of African indigenous realities. Education became more focused on the promotion of individual and national development, and this led to the rise of philosophies of harmonization, ruralization, and bilingualism in Cameroon's system of education. The philosophy of ruralization was a philosophy of indigenization and self-reliance, while colonial education was mainly focused on religious teachings and the acquisition of the 3 R's, which are reading, writing, and arithmetic. Ruralization was aimed at intensively training youths for agricultural realities that would be beneficial to them and the economy of the state. This led to the creation of the IPAR, which is the Institut de Pédagogie Appliquée d'Éducation Rurale in Buea and in Yaoundé in the 1970s. The mission of these institutions was to adopt education to local agricultural realities. These institutions still exist today in our country. They offer a variety of professional training to Cameroonians and foreigners as well. They offer ruralization is the backbone of professionalism and is the backbone of professionalization of education in Cameroon. It has influenced the creation of numerous vocational and technical schools throughout the national territory today. The introduction of the new pedagogy approach NPA in 2002 and the competence-based approach CBA in 2012 into the Cameroon's educational system were also fruits of ruralization. These approaches are aimed at developing, perfecting, and orienting skills in learners. The philosophy of harmonization promoted the uniformity and standardization of Cameroon's educational system. According to this philosophy, all Cameroonian Cameroonian citizens had to be provided a unique formal education, irrespective of them being Anglophones or Francophones. This led to the unfair blend of the Anglophone and the Francophone subsystem of education into a unified system of government, because we all can attest to the fact that the Anglophone system of government is still being marginalized till today. Harmonization has many lapses. It led to the clash of philosophies of education, structural friction, and the fear of French assimilation by the Anglophones, since French language, curriculum, and administrative structures was dominant over the English system of education. Unfortunately, this is still a major problem that still affects our present educational system. Today, we have French administrators and teachers who can barely express themselves in English language, teaching and heading purely Anglophone schools. We see in our educational system today, French-speaking teachers are sent to English-speaking zones to teach in English. How do you then transfer knowledge to learners when you cannot even speak in the language? So that's a major challenge we are facing in the educational system today. Almost all official documents are also published in French. You see text coming from the ministry to English-speaking schools in French, and it makes it difficult for the teachers or the administrators to even comprehend and explain to the teachers because the English versions are not sent. The fear of assimilation and the unresolved problem of the Anglophone marginalization over all these years finally contributed to the rise of the Anglophone crisis since 2016 to date. Bilingualism is also a political philosophy that was developed under the Unitary state of Cameroon. In many countries, learning a second language is usually a skill, but in the Unitary system of government, it's a political philosophy. Bilingualism is constitutionally enshrined not just for communication, but as the glue of the nation. This led to the adoption of the 1998 law on education, which explicitly mandates bilingualism at all levels, that's from the basic to higher institutions. It is no longer optional, it is a civic duty. The existence of several bilingual schools, particularly bilingual high schools, lycées in all 10 regions of the country, is a direct physical manifestation of this philosophy. We will conclude our work by saying that the unitary system of government in Cameroon has been heavily influenced by the colonial legacy, the post-independent unification process, the political and cultural diversity of the country. While the system has evolved with a focus on bilingualism and national unity, challenges related to educational access, quality and regional disparities remain significant in our educational system today. The path forward will require addressing the tensions between the linguistic and cultural diversity while ensuring that education becomes a tool for national cohesion and socio-economic development. Thank you.